There is a paradox unfolding before our eyes. In the heart of modern Western cities, where towering skyscrapers house multinational corporations, where university campuses buzz with intellectual debate, and where the rhythms of daily life are dictated by technology and commerce, an ancient faith is finding new life. The call to prayer echoes through neighborhoods once dominated by secularism, and mosques are rising where churches once stood. Islam, a religion born in the deserts of 7th century Arabia, is now one of the fastest growing faiths in the West. How do we make sense of this phenomenon? What draws people in the West, so deeply shaped by Enlightenment rationalism, consumerism, and individualism, to a religion so often portrayed as foreign, even incompatible with modern life? This question deserves our attention, not merely out of curiosity, but because it speaks to something deeper about the spiritual condition of our time. We live in an age where traditional religious structures are eroding, where many have abandoned the faith of their ancestors, and where a sense of meaning often feels elusive. And yet, despite this widespread drift towards secularism, Islam continues to grow. Converts from Christianity, agnosticism, and atheism are embracing its teachings. Communities are expanding not through coercion but through conviction. What is it about Islam that resonates so powerfully in this moment? Is it cultural, theological, or something even more profound? Some might argue that Islam's growth is simply a demographic reality. Migration patterns, birth rates, and political development certainly play a role, but that explanation only scratches the surface. There is something more at work here, something stirring in the human heart. The West has long prided itself on its intellectual and technological advancements, yet many find themselves spiritually restless, searching for something beyond the material comforts and fleeting pleasures of modern life. Could it be that Islam, with its emphasis on submission, discipline, and a direct relationship with the divine, offers a compelling alternative to the emptiness of a world without transcendent meaning? To understand this phenomenon, we must look beyond statistics and headlines. We must explore the core tenets of Islam, the historical forces that have shaped its presence in the West, and the ways in which it speaks to the deepest longings of the human soul. Only then can we begin to grasp why, in a world that often seems to have moved beyond religion, Islam is not only surviving, but thriving. To truly understand why Islam resonates so deeply in the West today, we must first journey back to its origins. Islam did not emerge in a vacuum. It was born in a world already rich with spiritual traditions, philosophical debates, and complex social structures. At the heart of this story is the Prophet Muhammad, a man whose life would forever alter the course of human history. Born in Mecca in the late 6th century, Muhammad grew up in a society where polytheism was widespread, tribal allegiances were paramount, and the spiritual landscape was fragmented. Yet, in the midst of this uncertainty, he was known for his integrity, wisdom, and deep contemplation. He would often retreat to the caves of Mount Hira, seeking solitude and reflection, and it was there, in those quiet moments, that he received the first revelation from God, an experience that would set him on a path unlike any other. The message Muhammad received was one of profound simplicity and cosmic significance. There is one God, the creator of all things, and humanity must submit to his will. This concept of Tawheed, the absolute oneness of God, was revolutionary in a world where idol worship and superstition were deeply ingrained. It was also a message of moral and social transformation. Islam did not merely offer a new theology, it called for a radical reordering of society. A vision of justice, compassion, and unity that challenged the prevailing norms of the time. The early Muslim community, though small and often persecuted, began to attract followers from all walks of life, drawn not only by the compelling message of monotheism, but also by the ethical framework that accompanied it. As the movement grew, so too did opposition. The leaders of Mecca, threatened by Muhammad's teachings and the growing influence of his followers, sought to silence him. Persecution intensified, and the early Muslims faced exile, imprisonment, and even martyrdom. Yet their faith remained unshaken. In 622 AD, Muhammad and his followers made the historic migration to Medina, an event known as the Hijrah. This marked the beginning of a new phase, not just for Muhammad, but for the entire Islamic tradition. In Medina, he established the first true Islamic society, one built on principles of governance, justice, and communal responsibility. The Prophet's leadership was not merely spiritual, it was profoundly practical. He mediated disputes, formed alliances, and laid the foundation for a civilization that would soon spread far beyond the Arabian Peninsula. The years that followed saw the rapid expansion of Islam, not through conquest alone, but through the persuasive power of its message. The early Muslim community, guided by the Qur'an and the example of the Prophet, continued to grow, attracting converts from diverse backgrounds. The early battles, such as the Battle of Badr and the eventual peaceful return to Mecca, were not just military victories, they were symbolic of the triumph of faith over adversity. When Mecca finally fell to the Muslims, Muhammad did not seek revenge. Instead, he forgave his former enemies, declaring a general amnesty and rededicating the Kaaba, the sacred site at the heart of Islamic worship, to the worship of the one true God. These foundational events laid the groundwork for Islam's enduring appeal. The early Muslim community demonstrated a remarkable ability to adapt and integrate while maintaining its core identity. Unlike many religious movements that sought to dominate through force, Islam spread largely through trade, diplomacy, and personal conviction. Merchants carried the message of Islam across Africa, Asia, and eventually into Europe, where it found fertile ground among those who yearned for spiritual clarity and a sense of purpose. The early Islamic empires, particularly under the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, became centers of learning, science, and culture, attracting scholars and seekers from all over the world. This historical context is essential in understanding why Islam continues to attract people in the West today. At its core, Islam is not just a religion of doctrine and ritual. It is a way of life, rooted in a profound spiritual and moral vision. Its origins are marked by resilience, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to the divine. These qualities remain deeply relevant in a world that often feels fragmented and morally adrift. As we continue to explore the reasons behind Islam's growth in the West, we must keep in mind that its appeal is not merely cultural or political, it is deeply spiritual, rooted in a message that has resonated across centuries and continues to speak to the hearts of those searching for meaning. Let me speak plainly. The West, for all its achievements, has been drifting. We have built towering cities, harnessed the power of science, and created economies that stretch across the globe. And yet, for all this progress, something is missing. a deep sense of purpose, a moral compass, a spiritual foundation. These things, once anchored in religious faith, have been eroded by the relentless march of secularism. In this vacuum, many have turned to consumerism, materialism, or the fleeting satisfaction of personal ambition. But these things do not satisfy the soul. They offer no ultimate meaning, no enduring hope. Islam, in contrast, speaks with clarity and conviction. It does not waver in its proclamation of God's sovereignty, nor does it compromise on the moral order that flows from divine truth. In a world increasingly defined by relativism, where truth is seen as subjective and morality as malleable, Islam stands firm. It does not bend to the shifting tides of cultural fashion. It does not accommodate the idea that all paths lead equally to God. It asserts boldly and unapologetically that there is one Creator, one truth, and one way of life that aligns with that truth. For many in the West, this certainty is a breath of fresh air. It offers a refuge from the confusion and ambiguity that so often characterize modern existence. Consider the structure of Islamic belief. The 5 pillars: faith in one God, daily prayer, almsgiving, fasting, and pilgrimage are not mere rituals. They are disciplines that shape a person's entire way of life. In a society where individualism reigns and personal desires are often elevated above all else, Islam places the believer in a constant relationship with the divine. Prayer 5 times a day interrupts the rhythm of daily life with a reminder of God's presence. Fasting during Ramadan cultivates self-discipline and compassion for the less fortunate. Almsgiving ensures that wealth is not hoarded but shared. These practices create a life of intentionality, a life that is not driven by fleeting impulses but by a deeper, more enduring purpose. And then there is the matter of identity. In an age where people often feel untethered, adrift in a sea of competing ideologies, where family structures are fraying and communities are fragmenting, Islam offers a profound sense of belonging. The Ummah, the global community of Muslims, is not defined by race, nationality, or social class. It is a spiritual brotherhood and sisterhood that transcends borders. For those who feel disconnected from the institutions of the past, the church, the neighborhood, the extended family, Islam provides a new home. Converts speak of the warmth they find in Muslim communities, the way they are embraced not as outsiders but as brothers and sisters in faith. This sense of unity, of shared purpose, is deeply attractive in a world where loneliness and alienation are increasingly common. So, what do we make of this? Islam is not growing in the West because it is trendy or politically correct. It is growing because it offers something that modern secularism cannot: a coherent worldview, a moral foundation, and a way of life that gives meaning to every moment. In a culture that often reduces human beings to consumers or political pawns, Islam reminds us that we are creatures with a purpose, made for worship, for community, and for a relationship with the divine. It is no wonder, then, that so many are drawn to it. One of the most striking aspects of Islam that resonates with people in the West is its profound emphasis on community. Unlike the hyper-individualistic tendencies of modern secular life, where personal fulfillment often takes precedence over collective well-being, Islam places the community at the very heart of the believer's life. The concept of the Ummah, the global Muslim community, transcends national, ethnic, and cultural boundaries, creating a sense of belonging that is both deeply spiritual and socially tangible. This communal dimension of Islam is not merely an abstract ideal. It is lived out in the daily rhythms of Muslim life, from the shared experience of prayer to the collective observance of fasting and the celebration of religious festivals. Imagine, if you will, the scene of a Friday congregational prayer. As the sun reaches its zenith, Muslims from all walks of life, students, professionals, laborers, and elders, gather in mosques large and small. They stand shoulder to shoulder, regardless of social status or background, united in submission to God. The Imam delivers a sermon that not only addresses spiritual matters but also speaks to the pressing concerns of the community. Afterward, worshippers greet one another with the words, "Assalamu alaikum," peace be upon you, and often share a meal or engage in conversation. This weekly ritual is not just an act of worship. It is a reaffirmation of identity, a strengthening of bonds, and a reminder that faith is not meant to be lived in isolation. This sense of community is further reinforced through the practice of zakat, the obligatory charitable giving that ensures the well-being of the less fortunate. Unlike voluntary charity, which can be sporadic and inconsistent, zakat is a structured system that obliges Muslims to give a portion of their wealth to support the poor, the orphaned, and the needy. This practice cultivates a deep awareness of social responsibility, reminding believers that their resources are not solely for personal gain, but for the good of the whole. In a world where economic inequality continues to widen, where the affluent often live in insulated bubbles, the Islamic emphasis on shared responsibility is both radical and deeply attractive. And then there is the month of Ramadan, a time when the entire Muslim community comes together in a shared spiritual discipline. From dawn until sunset, Muslims abstain from food, drink, and other physical comforts, not merely as an act of self-denial, but as a means of cultivating empathy, self-discipline, and gratitude. The breaking of the fast each evening, Samtarzi, is a communal event, often hosted in mosques or in homes where neighbors and strangers alike are welcomed. During this time, the sense of unity is palpable. Muslims support one another in their spiritual journey, offering encouragement, sharing meals, and reinforcing the bonds of faith and fellowship. It is no wonder that many converts describe the experience of Ramadan as transformative, a time when they feel an overwhelming sense of belonging and connection. Beyond these structured practices, the informal networks of support within Muslim communities are equally significant. When a family faces hardship, whether due to illness, financial struggle, or personal loss, the community steps in to provide assistance. Weddings, births, and even funerals are communal affairs where the joys and sorrows of individuals are shared by all. This contrasts sharply with the isolation that so often characterizes modern Western life, where individuals may live surrounded by people, yet feel profoundly alone. In Islam, faith is not just a private matter. It is lived out in the fabric of daily relationships, in the shared experiences of joy and sorrow, in the unwavering commitment to care for one another. This communal spirit is particularly compelling in an age where loneliness has become a silent epidemic. Studies have shown that social isolation is a growing problem, especially among younger generations, who may have hundreds of online connections, yet few meaningful relationships. Islam, with its emphasis on face-to-face interaction, shared rituals, and mutual support, offers a powerful antidote to this crisis. Converts often speak of the warmth and acceptance they find within Muslim communities, where they are not merely tolerated, but embraced as brothers and sisters in faith. For those who have felt adrift in a world of transient relationships and superficial interactions, this sense of belonging is nothing short of life-changing. So, as we reflect on why Islam is growing in the West, we must not overlook the magnetic pull of its communal dimension. It is not simply a matter of doctrine or ritual. It is about being part of something greater than oneself. It is about finding a home, a family, a people who stand together in faith, in struggle, and in hope. Let me speak plainly. In a world where moral clarity is often drowned out by relativism and shifting cultural norms, Islam offers a firm foundation. It does not waver in its ethical convictions. It does not bend to the pressures of the moment. It presents a vision of right and wrong that is rooted in divine command, and this unwavering stance is precisely what draws so many to its teachings. In the West, where moral ambiguity has become the norm, where truth is often seen as subjective and virtue as negotiable, Islam stands as a beacon of certainty. We live in a time when personal autonomy is exalted above all else, when individuals are encouraged to define their own values, and when moral absolutes are often dismissed as outdated relics of a bygone era. The result? A culture that struggles to agree on even the most basic questions of right and wrong. Issues that once had clear moral boundaries, such as the sanctity of life, the nature of marriage, and the responsibilities of individuals to their communities, are now mired in endless debate where consensus is elusive and conviction is often met with suspicion. In such an environment, Islam's clear moral framework is profoundly attractive. At the heart of Islamic ethics is the concept of qadar, divine decree. Muslims believe that morality is not something humans construct for themselves, but something revealed by God. This belief instills a deep sense of purpose and direction. There is no ambiguity about what is right and what is wrong. The Qur'an and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad provide clear guidelines on how to live a life of integrity, justice, and compassion. These teachings are not mere suggestions, they are obligations that shape a believer's entire way of life. In a world where moral relativism leaves many feeling adrift, Islam offers a sense of grounding, a moral compass that points unwaveringly toward truth. Take, for instance, the Islamic emphasis on justice. The Qur'an repeatedly calls upon believers to uphold fairness, to protect the rights of the vulnerable, and to stand against oppression. In a time when injustice often goes unchecked, when the powerful exploit the weak, when corruption festers in institutions, and when the cries of the marginalized are ignored, Islam's commitment to justice is both compelling and necessary. This is not justice as an abstract ideal, it is justice as a lived reality. Muslims are called to embody fairness in all aspects of life, from business dealings to family relationships, from legal proceedings to personal conduct. It is no wonder that those who long for a world of integrity and righteousness find themselves drawn to Islam's moral vision. And then there is the matter of personal responsibility. Unlike ideologies that absolve individuals of moral accountability by attributing behavior to social conditioning or biological determinism, Islam places the burden and the blessing of choice squarely on the individual. Every human being is free, and with that freedom comes responsibility. This belief resonates deeply in a culture that often seeks to excuse wrongdoing rather than confront it. Islam does not permit the evasion of moral responsibility. It teaches that each person is accountable for their actions, and that every deed, no matter how small, will be weighed on the day of judgment. This belief instills a profound sense of seriousness about life. It reminds believers that their choices matter, that their actions have consequences, and that they are called to live with integrity. Furthermore, Islam's ethical framework extends beyond individual morality to encompass social responsibility. The concept of zakat, the obligatory charitable giving, is not simply a financial duty, it is a moral imperative. It ensures that wealth is not hoarded by the few, but shared with the many. In a world where economic inequality continues to widen, where the affluent often live in insulated comfort, while the poor struggle to survive, Islam's insistence on economic justice is both radical and necessary. It challenges the notion that personal success is the ultimate goal, instead reminding believers that true prosperity lies in generosity and care for others. So as we reflect on why Islam is growing in the West, we must recognize the power of its moral and ethical framework. In a world that often feels morally adrift, Islam offers clarity, conviction, and a compelling vision of what it means to live a life of purpose and integrity. The mystical and spiritual dimensions of Islam. Let me speak plainly about something that often gets overlooked in discussions about Islam: its profound spiritual depth. At its heart lies a deep yearning for closeness with God, a longing that resonates with the deepest desires of the human spirit. In the West, where many have grown weary of sterile rationalism and the cold pragmatism of modern life, this spiritual dimension of Islam holds a powerful allure. It speaks to those who are searching not just for answers, but for meaning, for transcendence, for a connection to something greater than themselves. One of the most striking expressions of this spirituality is found in Sufism, the mystical tradition within Islam, where Islam says, when you feel for something, the mystical tradition within is often misunderstood in the West. Sufism is not a separate sect, but rather an inner dimension of Islam, one that emphasizes love, devotion, and the pursuit of divine knowledge. Sufi mystics have long taught that the purpose of life is not merely to obey God's commands, but to cultivate an intimate relationship with Him. They see the world as a veil, a temporary reality that obscures the eternal truth of God's presence. Through prayer, meditation, and acts of self-discipline, the Sufi seeks to peel away this veil and experience the divine directly. Consider the practice of dhikr, the remembrance of God. In Sufi gatherings, believers chant the names of God, repeating phrases like Allahu Akbar or La ilaha illallah with rhythmic precision. This is not a mere mechanical exercise. It is a form of spiritual awakening. As the heart becomes attuned to these sacred words, the mind quiets and the soul begins to sense the presence of the divine. By the way, it stirs something deep within them. It is not uncommon for those who have felt spiritually adrift to find in dhikr a profound sense of peace, as if they have finally come home. Another aspect of Islamic spirituality that deeply moves those in the West is the concept of divine love. While Islam is often associated in the popular imagination with strict laws and rigid doctrines, its mystical tradition reveals a God who is not only just, but also infinitely merciful and loving. The Qur'an itself declares, "God is the light of the heavens and the earth." And Sufi poets have expanded on this theme with breathtaking beauty. Rumi, the great Persian mystic, wrote extensively about the soul's longing for union with the beloved, using metaphors of intoxication, yearning, and surrender. His poetry, filled with images of divine love and spiritual ecstasy, has captivated readers across cultures and generations. For those in the West who have grown disillusioned with faith traditions that emphasize fear and judgment, the Sufi vision of a God who longs for his creation, who invites them into intimacy, is nothing short of revolutionary. Moreover, Islamic spirituality is deeply rooted in the idea of transformation. Unlike some religious traditions that view the body and material world as obstacles to spiritual growth, Islam sees them as sacred gifts to be used in the service of God. The body, with all its senses, is not something to be denied, but something to be sanctified. Fasting, for instance, is not just about abstaining from food and drink. It is about refining the self, about learning self-discipline and cultivating gratitude. The physical act of prostration in prayer is not merely a gesture of submission. It is a bodily expression of humility before the divine. Even the simple act of reciting the Qur'an is considered an act of worship that purifies the heart and elevates the soul. For those in the West who have grown tired of disembodied spirituality, of faith reduced to abstract ideas, Islam's holistic approach to spirituality is deeply appealing. And then there is the Islamic vision of paradise. In the Quran, paradise is not depicted as a vague, ethereal existence, but as a place of profound beauty, where the faithful will dwell in eternal peace, surrounded by gardens, rivers, and the company of loved ones. It is a place where the soul's deepest longings are fully satisfied, where there is no sorrow, no regret, no longing left unfulfilled. This vision of paradise is not just a reward for good deeds. It is a reflection of God's infinite mercy. It is a promise that the struggles of this life are not in vain, that there is a future beyond suffering, beyond death, beyond the limitations of this world. For those in the West who have lost sight of hope, who have been told that this life is all there is, that meaning must be manufactured rather than discovered, Islam's promise of eternal joy is a message of profound comfort. So, as we reflect on why Islam is growing in the West, we must not ignore the power of its spiritual dimension. It is not simply a matter of doctrine or ritual. It is about the soul's yearning for the divine. In a world that often feels spiritually barren, where the noise of modern life drowns out the whisper of the sacred, Islam offers a path, a way forward for those who seek not just knowledge, but wisdom, not just morality, but meaning, not just rules, but a relationship with the divine. Now, let me speak plainly about something that must be addressed. Islam, like any great religious tradition, is often misunderstood, especially in the West. Too often it is viewed through a distorted lens, shaped by fear, misinformation, and the selective portrayal of extreme events. When people hear the word Islam, they may immediately think of terrorism, oppression, or cultural backwardness. But I tell you this, these images do not represent the true face of Islam. They are distortions, shadows cast by the darkest corners of human behavior, not the light of the faith itself. Let me be clear. Islam is not a religion of violence. Yes, there are extremists who claim to act in its name, just as there have been extremists in every major religion throughout history. But to judge an entire faith by the actions of a fringe minority is not only unjust, it is profoundly misleading. The vast majority of Muslims are peaceful, law-abiding citizens who seek to live virtuous lives in accordance with their beliefs. They are your neighbors, your co-workers, your friends. They go to work, raise their children, pray to God, and contribute to the communities in which they live. To reduce their faith to the actions of a few radicals is to deny the lived reality of millions of people who find in Islam a source of strength, guidance, and spiritual fulfillment. Another common misconception is that Islam oppresses women. This belief is often reinforced by media portrayals and selective reporting, but the reality is far more nuanced. Islam, at its core, affirms the dignity and spiritual equality of men and women. The Qur'an explicitly states that men and women are equal in the eyes of God, and both are accountable for their deeds. Throughout Islamic history, women have played vital roles as scholars, businesswomen, rulers, and warriors. The first wife of the Prophet Muhammad, Khadija, was a successful entrepreneur who supported him both emotionally and financially. Aisha, another of his wives, was a respected scholar and teacher who contributed significantly to the development of Islamic jurisprudence. These examples are not anomalies. They are part of a broader tradition that values the contributions of women. Of course, like any religious tradition, Islam has been interpreted in different ways across different cultures and historical periods. Some societies have imposed unjust restrictions on women, just as certain interpretations of Christianity and Judaism have done in the past. But these cultural practices must not be confused with the core teachings of the faith itself. The hijab, for instance, is often seen in the West as a symbol of oppression, but for many Muslim women, it is a sign of modesty, dignity, and personal choice. It is not forced upon them by their faith. Rather, it is a decision rooted in religious conviction. To assume otherwise is to deny Muslim women the agency they deserve. There is also the matter of religious tolerance. Islam, contrary to popular belief, does not demand the eradication of other faiths. The Qur'an explicitly states, "There is no compulsion in religion," and throughout history, Muslim-majority societies have often been centers of religious pluralism. In medieval Spain, under Islamic rule, Jews and Christians were allowed to practice their faith freely, contributing to a flourishing of science, philosophy, and art. The Ottoman Empire, for centuries, protected Christian and Jewish communities, granting them autonomy under the millet system. These historical realities challenge the notion that Islam is inherently intolerant or expansionist. And then there is the issue of justice. Islam, at its best, is a religion that calls for fairness, compassion, and the protection of the vulnerable. The Quran repeatedly urges believers to stand against oppression, to defend the rights of the poor, the orphaned, and the oppressed. It condemns corruption, greed, and exploitation. In a world where injustice often prevails, where the powerful take advantage of the weak, Islam's moral vision is a call to righteousness. It is no wonder that many in the West, disillusioned by systems that prioritize profit over people, are drawn to a faith that demands ethical integrity and social responsibility. I do not pretend that Islam is without its challenges. No religion is immune to misinterpretation, and no community is free from imperfection. But I urge you to look beyond the headlines, beyond the caricatures, and to see Islam for what it truly is: a faith that has shaped the lives of billions, a tradition that has inspired art, science, and philosophy, and a spiritual path that continues to offer meaning and purpose in an age of uncertainty. To dismiss it as foreign, as incompatible with modernity, is to ignore its profound impact on human history and its enduring relevance in the present day. Let me speak plainly about the heart of this matter. The question before us is not simply why Islam is growing in the West. It is why people are turning to it in search of something deeper, something lasting. We have explored the historical roots of Islam, its moral clarity, its emphasis on community, and its rich spiritual traditions. But beneath all of these, there is an even more fundamental truth. Islam speaks to the deepest longings of the human soul. It offers a vision of life that is not fragmented, not adrift, but unified under the sovereignty of God. And in a world that often feels untethered, where meaning is elusive and purpose is in question, this vision is profoundly compelling. At the center of Islam is the concept of Tawheed, the absolute oneness of God. This is not merely a theological assertion. It is a declaration that everything in creation is connected, that there is a divine order to reality, and that human life finds its fulfillment in alignment with that order. In the West, where individualism reigns and personal desires are often elevated above all else, this belief in a higher, unifying truth is both challenging and liberating. It offers a way out of the chaos of relativism, a way back to meaning. When a person embraces Islam, they are not simply adopting a new set of beliefs. They are stepping into a world where every action, every moment, has significance, because it is lived in relation to the divine. This sense of purpose is especially powerful in an age where many feel unmoored. Consider the young man or woman who has grown up in a world of endless choices, where every path seems open, but no direction feels certain. They may have been raised in a secular household where faith was either absent or reduced to a cultural tradition. They may have pursued careers, relationships, and experiences only to find that something essential was still missing. And then they encounter Islam, a faith that does not offer ambiguity but clarity, that does not leave them adrift but gives them a compass. In Islam, they find a structure for their lives, a rhythm of prayer and devotion that brings them into constant communion with God. They find a moral framework that does not shift with the tides of public opinion, but stands firm in the light of divine truth. And they find a community that welcomes them, not as strangers, but as brothers and sisters in faith. Or consider the person who has experienced suffering, perhaps the loss of a loved one, the failure of a relationship, or the weight of personal struggle. In such moments, the question of meaning becomes urgent. Islam does not promise an easy life, but it offers a way to understand suffering within a larger spiritual framework. It teaches that hardship is part of the human experience, that trials are a test of faith, and that endurance in the face of difficulty is itself an act of worship. This perspective does not diminish suffering, but it gives it a place within a narrative of hope. For those who have felt abandoned in their pain, Islam's message of divine mercy and ultimate justice is deeply comforting. And then there is the matter of identity. In a world where cultural and familial ties are often weakened, where people struggle to know who they truly are, Islam offers a profound sense of belonging. The Ummah, the global community of Muslims, transcends national borders, ethnic divisions, and social hierarchies. A convert from the West, upon embracing Islam, is not merely joining a religion. They are becoming part of a worldwide family that spans continents and centuries. This sense of unity, of shared purpose, is something many have longed for without even realizing it. So why is Islam growing in the West? Because it speaks to the deepest questions of the human heart. It offers meaning in a world that often feels meaningless, direction in a world that often feels lost, and belonging in a world that often feels lonely. It does not promise an easy path, but it offers a path that is rooted in truth, guided by virtue, and sustained by faith. And for those who have searched for something more, who have felt that there must be a deeper reality beyond the surface of life, Islam is an answer that resonates with the soul. In the end, the growth of Islam in the West is not merely a demographic trend or a cultural shift. It is a spiritual movement. It is a sign that, despite the noise of modern life, the human heart still yearns for God. And for those who are willing to listen, Islam offers a voice that speaks with clarity, with conviction, and with the promise of peace.